Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to promote a GTAC member who is in the attendee list. Okay, welcome everyone. This is the 6th meeting of the Government Transition Advisory Committee's Budget Work Group, and it's the 10th meeting of the Government Transition Advisory Committee's Districts and Council Operations Subcommittee. Today's Tuesday, July 30th, and we'll be here from 3:30 till 5. My name is Julia Meyer. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Engagement and Community Participation Manager for the transition. I do just want to take a moment to welcome Ruby and I think Jenna, who hopefully are joining us today. You will all see them around a lot this summer. They're summer fellows. So you'll see them at a lot of GTAC meetings, and just super happy that they're here. So our co-chairs, Destiny and Terry, are going to facilitate today's meeting. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to take a moment to go over some meeting logistics. This meeting is being live streamed on YouTube, and a recording of the meeting will be posted on the city's transition website under past meetings and events. For today's meeting, we have closed captioning available. To access closed captioning, you can click on the CC button on the bottom of your screen. For committee members, please take this moment to change your chat settings to everyone so that those in attendance can view the chat. And please remember that the chat is part of the public meeting record. For community members listening in, welcome. Really glad that you're here. We have the Zoom Q&A feature enabled. You can submit questions or comments through the Q&A function. We don't always live answer questions, but we do read them, and they also become part of the public meeting record. At today's meeting, we are not taking verbal public comment, but as a reminder, you can submit public comment at any time through our online form at the transition website. You could call 311, or you can email us at transition@portlandoregon.gov. If you prefer to give verbal public comment, which I love, you can sign up to do so at our next full GTAC meeting, which is next week on August 7th. And with that, I'm going to pass it to Destiny to review today's agenda, and we'll go to the next slide, please. Thanks.
Thank you, Julia. And so today's agenda includes subcommittee business and engagement update, members' proposed revisions to the draft recommendations based on the input to date, and then we will close with onboarding. Before we adjourn our meeting today, we will also identify next steps. Next slide, please. So far, no one has let us know that they're unable to attend, so otherwise we expect full attendance. We do need to approve the June 17th meeting summary. Does anyone have any proposed revisions before I take a motion to approve? Joe?
Yeah, the copy that I got had several things duplicated, and maybe that was just an oddity of the one that I got, or maybe it's been corrected, but there was that sort of typo problem. Don't have it in front of me.
Duplication of like the same words twice?
Yeah, the same phrases.
Okay. Fabulous. So we will check for duplications and delete the meeting notes. Julia has a thumbs up. So other than that, with those duplication corrections, we have a motion to approve.
Zach, I'll move.
I barely hear Zach. He moves. Do I have a second?
I second.
Juanita seconds. Everybody want to put a thumbs up for yay? I'm gonna see. I see a bunch of yays. Okay, anyone want to put a thumbs down for nay? I don't see any
I'm gonna abstain, Destiny, because I was currently AWOL for that meeting.
Okay, and we have one abstain.
That's true, me too.
I think Lori, 2 abstains, the rest were yays, so that passes. Noted, thank you. All right, next slide, please. We're going to go over our working agreements, and the working agreement states as follow. First, in discussion, challenge ideas rather than individuals, offer constructive suggestions. Second, approach different opinions with curiosity and seek to understand. Third, keep the needs and concerns of the local community and the larger region at the forefront of the work. 4, arrive on time and prepared to the best of your ability. Let the unable to attend a meeting. The coaches will try to incorporate breather tools. 5, keep multitasking to a minimum. 6, keep focus on the objectives of the meetings. Utilize co-chairs to note additional topics for discussion by submitting topics in writing via email. Next slide, please. Continuing, we honor the decisions of the group. 8, contribute to the overall success of the group by finding ways to participate that best meet your needs. 9, step up and step back, collectively work to ensure that every member who wants to be heard is heard. 10, embrace conflict and work with your fellow committee members and staff to find ways to give each other feedback. The co-chairs will aim to incorporate various feedback tools. 11, use I statements. Next slide, please. Thank you. And so before we get into our input on our draft recommendations, I want to remind folks about how we will get to our final recommendations in mid-September. Today, we are going to begin proposing revisions to our recommendations, if there are any, based on the engagement to date. The summer engagement period does close on August 12th, and the community engagement report will be available for us to review in its full entirety on August 21st. Taking in all of that feedback. We will reconvene on August 27th to finalize our recommendations, and we will present our final recommendations to GTAC on September 11th for their consideration and vote. Next, I will pass it on to Terry. Next slide, please. Thank you.
Okay, so here we go. The first thing on this agenda is the engagement update. And last week we distributed a copy of a community engagement report. That report had internal and external input on our draft recommendations that we released earlier in the summer. We hope you had time to read the report because we're not going to go through them here. But we did want to take a few minutes. We've got 10 minutes here to reflect or comment on that report itself before we get into a discussion about the revisions. Now, that, again, the idea here is that stuff in the report may or may not have triggered something in your brains about what we need or not need to do to our original recommendations. So that's next up on the agenda, but currently just on the engagement itself. Anybody have any reflections, comments, etc.? Oh, I've got some, but Juanita.
Well, I just want to say that I was very pleased with the feedback from the community in some of these areas, and that there is a lot that we can do, utilize that feedback from the community to improve our recommendations. That's mainly it.
Other comments? Jose?
I know that this is hard to do, but the percentage of people that are young or LGBTQ for the survey were so small. It's like 1%. That we really should try to focus on trying to get more of those demographics next time.
Heard. Anybody else? Comments? Okay, well, here's my 2 cents then. I in reading it, I thought generally the comments were pretty supportive of our recommendations. Just
Yeah.
I think indicated to me that we were on the right track and have sort of a good baseline of the recommendations so far, based on the engagement so far. On my read of it, I was disappointed on internal stakeholders because I read the report as on a number of occasions saying that we don't have the staffing to do this, or how are we going to get the budget to do this? And it seemed to me that, first of all, it was beyond our scope a little bit, and it's just a matter of priorities. And it seemed naysaying somewhat. Now, in our meeting the other day with Destiny and Julia, because I wasn't in those meetings to hear it directly, the tone was apparently staff is encouraged by our recommendations and are looking forward to next steps of implementing and want suggestions about implementation. And so I have to take the word of the folks that were in that meeting that that was the tone. And if that's the case, again, I think our recommendations are holding up pretty well. But it's the difficulty of filtering the actual statements through a report down to us to think about. Other comments? Lori.
Yeah, I guess just to add on to that, before you spoke, Terry, I was about to raise my hand and say that I actually appreciated the city employee feedback, because I thought in some respects, the fact that many of their comments seemed generally supportive, and I thought it gave a little bit of a reality check and helped, maybe helped prioritize, might not be able to do all, but these ones seemed a higher priority. So I guess I just appreciated seeing that relative to the community input and ours. I thought it was very balanced, and I appreciated having their inputs.
Other comments? Julia, you want to say anything about any of it?
Thanks, Terry. I mean, I will say I had the benefit of being in I did all of the internal briefings. And I purposely kind of reached out to parts of our city that work in areas that your recommendations touch or that would be responsible for implementing them. And I think Lori's takeaway was mine. I mean, if there was ever something that they maybe didn't fully agree with or had questions about, that was noted. But I think it was sort of a further down the line. Okay, so assuming this is what city leaders decide to do we have enough information to implement it? Is it detailed enough was often the question. Or oh, GTAC wants this. Do they want it this way or this other way? They were sort of already down the path. It wasn't sort of resistance, or there's a couple of things that there's real budget concerns. We'd love to do that, but could you prioritize, for example, if these 10 communication tools to improve Portlanders' understanding of the budget are all good and we can't implement all of them, does GTAC have any advice about which we would do first? So I think it was very much generally implementation. It was great conversations. You can see the list of folks that I engaged in this midway engagement report, but I will say our engagement period doesn't close until August 12th. So if you see a group that you think is missing that I should have reached out to and that you'd like internal feedback from, let me know as soon as you can, or drop it in the chat, because I'm happy to keep continuing to have conversations with folks at the city. Thanks, Terry.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, before we go on then to the next item, just on that topic, because the next item is what we do next with our, whether to revise, how to revise our recommendations. Some of those things that staff wanted us to look forward to doing, budget or staffing. I don't know whether we are on the hook for more explanation. But I guess that's downstream. Okay, so let me turn it over then to Destiny for the next.
Thank you, Terry. If we could go one slide back, please. So now we're going to go over we're going to hear members' proposed revision based on the input to date in that report. Like Terry said, we won't have time to discuss or reach agreement on people's revisions, but we want to get as many of them on the table if you captured any. After today's meeting, we will collect folks' thoughts on the proposed revision that we gathered in this meeting in an online survey and share the results with you prior to our next meeting in an iterative process. And so, can I get the next slide, please? Okay, so these are the main big topics. Let's see here. We will have about 5 minutes per recommendation area to collect folks' proposed revisions. The recommendation areas are on the slide, and we will have about 5 minutes at the very end for other revisions that aren't covered by the previous areas. Some ideas were new in the report. Some of them were more innovative that we hadn't heard about, so that's that section. Terry and I have added some of our ideas and takeaways from the report, and we aren't taking questions or feedback on those proposed revisions. We're just putting them there as an idea to give you some guidance of what we're looking for. Julia will make note of your ideas. Please use the chat to share them and +1 another's ideas. But that's kind of the general rule for this section to try to get us to go through all of them because it's big. And so for the first, next slide, please. Thank you. For the first area of recommendation is accessing city council and city services. Again, Terry and I have added some ideas that we have seen from the report and we're thinking about. Please take a second to read them, just so that you can see some examples. And then you're ready, please raise your virtual hand on this part if you've had anything come up from this section on this recommendation from the report feedback. Again, 5 minutes. All right, Juliet.
Yeah, thanks, Destiny. So I don't have this in front of me. I just have my notes. And so I may be combining a few things, but I appreciate you focusing in on the 311 because I'm trying to picture technically how this is all going to work. So what I've been confused about the whole time is how is 311 and Zendesk and what I assume will be a revision or reorg of the city website, how are those things going to fit together? Are they going to be complementary? Has anyone talked to technology services about whether these things are technically possible and whether they are complementary solutions? We've gotten some feedback from the public about other types of technical solutions, and we haven't gotten too far into that, for obvious reasons, but I would like to know more. And before we put that out there, I want to make sure that it really can be done. And the other thing was, and do we have the budget for it? That's the other part of that. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Juliet, for raising those questions and flagging that. Juanita?
Yes, I I definitely agree with Juliet about that we need more information, and I feel like it would be wonderful, especially in some of those questions where technology is involved. As I was reading the report, I think that we haven't heard from the people that works in technology, and it would be interesting to hear from them, from their perspective, about what type of system can be developed to achieve what we're trying to achieve in terms of accessing city council and city services. So to me, that's the first thing it came to mind. The second thing is that I don't feel that I have enough information. We're still having some process to do for feedback, listening to the listening sessions. And I feel like it's a little bit pushing it too hard to try to make today recommendations to the recommendations when we don't have yet a full picture. So that's I want to share that concern. I feel like we're being try to do something that, yeah, for the exercise we can do it, but we're going to get more feedback, and we haven't either discussed the impact of the report that was issued in regards to the budget and finance staffing and budget process transition report recommendations.
Juanita?
Yes.
That's a big trail that we're going on there. That's a little outside of this activity. So I think we could probably hold that off towards the end because that's talking about
Okay,
like
thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Juanita. But we did capture your questions.
Thank you.
Fred?
Yes, thank you, Destiny. I again, with the tracking system, my thought, I had always thought that it was a way to make sure that there was a feedback loop, that when you called wherever in the city with a question or concern, that it was noted who you were, who you talked to, what the concern was, and what happened to it, and that there would be a response of some sort. And I didn't think it was limited only to elected officials, but actually, more importantly, to the 7,800 employees that are under the city administrators and mayor's aegis. Because that's where I hear complaints that I did not hear back from, or they have not resolved my issue, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm not sure that this sounds, is this first bullet that the 311 type system is just comparing it to ACE, there's a system already for elected officials, or is it to be specific that it is for elected officials? I think it's for the entire city structure. Elected officials probably need the feedback loop too, or tracking, but that's my concern. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred.
If I can pipe up real quick here. I mean, we set aside 5 minutes for each of these slides, and we've hit the 5-minute mark. I'm gonna sort of suggest that, let me get to Zach's comment here. We're going to have to roll through these like a brainstorming session as opposed to discussion of 311. And to Juanita's point, I think is well taken, that this is preliminary in that our comment period is still open. So it's, in theory, what this process is to identify areas where we might need to do some work. And then looking at our schedule, I think we need to do that work at our August meeting, August 27th, I think. So that's what we're trying to do, is trying to get a head start on it. But it's premature and it's just brainstorming right now. And that's where we're at. Okay. So let's finish up this section And I will be the 5-minute timekeeper for the rest of them. And Destiny, call on Zach now.
Thank you, Terry. Zach?
Okay, hopefully you guys can hear me better to now. The thought that I had is we could do a lot better at describing and defining what an online hub for city council activities might be. Jose and I were in a good kind of policy dialogue with ERCO, and they raised very good points time and again of like how opaque the council agenda is, how difficult it is. You have to like do multiple clicks to access even the agenda itself. And we could do some pretty straightforward and easy research to identify like other cities or jurisdictions and what they do and call out what features are really powerful in accessibility and that kind of thing. So I would encourage us to maybe flesh out that recommendation a little bit further.
Thank you, Zach. All right, so that is captured on that slide. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is our other second recommendation area, which is accessing city council with district engagement. Again, any possible revisions or brainstorming ideas of work that we might have to flag already. And I will call on Joe.
Yeah, so I'm actually glad that I had to leave when I did, because I think the discussion of the first point sort of illustrates what I wanted to say. This is a lot of material for us to discuss. It's things that really deserve full consideration. I mean, these are our recommendations after all. And the input period is still open. And so it seems to me that while it's good to sort of, check in at this point, what I'd like to see is at our next meeting on the 27th, that it's already scheduled for 2 hours. Maybe we even need longer than that. I suggest that we meet in person where we can spread out and not have to do a Zoom kind of meeting, and make it a public meeting, have cameras there and everything, but just give us a chance to discuss these things in the way that they deserve rather than in the way that Zoom limits us to. And I think the 27th would be good timing since that's after the public input period closes.
Thank you, Joe, for raising that idea and recommendation. We have gotten a little bit of, there's a lot of fatigue and like work constrictions that are making it kind of challenging to move forward. And also, again, these are big discussions. I mean, we had multiple meetings in order to just come up with these recommendations. So again, brainstorming some like work that, we need to define more, or we need to look up more on our recommendations, or we're way off base. We're just flagging that now because we're still going to get input. Juliet?
So I don't know where this even goes. I think it's a theme that may affect several of our topics today, but somewhere along the way, the new counselors will have to understand that they're going to have to make some maybe difficult choices about their resources and how they go about all of this. And they might want to set their intentions fairly early on because things are going to move quickly. I just want to make sure they understand that they're just going to have this one staffer, and they're going to have a very modest, plan for the use of their time.
Thank you, Juliet. We got that flagged. And that it should be in multiple themes, most likely. Lori?
I know you don't have it listed here, but one of the things that struck me is on district offices. When you look at our original recommendations, they were written up when they were being submitted to city council, and a lot has changed since we wrote those recommendations, as well as looking at the feedback that we've gotten. I think there's an opportunity to refine that section quite a bit.
Lori, I think one of the revisions I put there is like a more specific one, but any ideas that you have? Let me have it then.
Um,
Fred, did you want to say something?
yeah, I thought maybe I was, sorry, I was trying to save time by typing it out, but by east side, are we talking, in this last bullet, are we talking about more District 1, east of 82nd, rather than east of the Willamette? Oh, I know that Jose's been, a lot of people from District 1 are raising that concern, including.
I wrote that bullet point, and it was from the feedback in the report where it was like a separate town hall or virtual community space, virtual meetings, and like east side accessibility. So I just put that there because clearly there's no facilities in District 1 or east side. So just general.
Well, yeah, District 1, there isn't, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's more city facilities that, if the security issues that facilities management is concerned about weren't insurmountable, would be quite amenable to district offices, but not necessarily city halls. Whereas I could see east of 82nd needing something much more profound than just a district office.
Absolutely. That's what the report input shared in those conversations.
So far east side, maybe.
Hey, time's up, Destiny.
Thank you, Terry, for keeping time. I know this is really hard, so thank you for bearing with me as we're trying to get, again, some strain of our identifications and where we need to think on our recommendations ahead of time. So thank you guys for your patience. And so are we in next slide? Our third area of recommendations is participating in city council decision-making. Again, some possible revisions that were raised during that report. I'll give a brief pause in case anyone had some.
Mm.
Zach?
Is it appropriate to add maybe some cold water on any of these bullet points?
Cold water?
Yeah, just I have strong reservations about expanding public comment for non-agenda related topics to tripling it in time length. We have frequent flyers already who kind of monopolize it, and so I just think that there's might be an opportunity to try to get at that issue in a different way than just expanding public comment at the beginning of committee meetings.
Thank you, Zach, for the comments. Jose?
I'm guessing allows recorded public comment is the one regarding video. We heard a lot because I know in a few of the policy discussions, I had different people suggest that they wanted to be able to leave video comment. So I don't know if we want to specifically just say allow recorded public comment such as video submissions, just to specifically say that because I did hear it specifically from a lot of different people.
Thank you, Jose. And I see Zach also liked your comment idea, and I did too. I put it in like that little page somewhere in there. So that seems like a flagged piece on engagement. And then an agreement that council should not be open to non-agenda items, testimony. And the 3 weeks notice be more flexible. So these are some ideas coming up. Any other markers of revisions that the report flagged for you?
Let me.
To be clear, I didn't say it shouldn't be all open all together, but it doesn't need to expand to 30 minutes. Thank you, Zach. Juanita?
Yeah, I'm a little bit confused now, and I need some clarification. What are we doing? I mean, what are we doing? I mean, we have our recommendations that we submitted. We received response from the team, and and it's but we still have time to finish our recommendations, and we still have time to get more input. So what are we? So what are we saying? That are we agreeing with this? Are these additional recommendations?
No.
Are these a breakdown of the recommendations already submitted? So I'm just trying to understand what are we doing. I apologize if I'm being too dense.
No, Juanita, it's fair. So there's a lot from this report that a lot of us would probably want to dissect and discuss, and it brings up a lot of more questions just based on the recommendations we did put forward. We're just trying to see if there's anything that came out of this report that might be trends that we need to fix our revisions that we want to highlight for further changes in our next meeting.
Yeah, because
and capture that and flag that for us. And
Yeah,
it will be iterative, so we will get more feedback.
yeah, well, that's my understanding, that we're going to have to submit a revised, not revised, but we need to look into the feedback that we receive from the staff and from the team and from the public, and then redo but I just feel like right now, yeah, anyway, so I will leave it there, I guess, because I'm still unclear. Thank you so much, Destiny.
Thank you, Juanita. Again, flag anything that you saw that we might need to adjust our recommendations. Like earlier, some people said we need to define our recommendations. Another one said we need to maybe acknowledge that budget requirements and priorities might need to be set forth. And we're going based on section and section, so at least we can have a common space to ground that conversation.
Next slide, Destiny.
Thank you, Terry. Okay, so this is our fourth area of the recommendations we did put out for public input, which is participating in the city's budget process. These are some, again, ideas of potential revisions or ideas that we saw in the report feedback. Is there anything you would like to flag that we might need to address when finalizing our recommendations? Juanita?
Yeah, and I know that you told me that there would be time in the end, but since this is regarding to the budget process, I think that we need to go back and clarify with the city or with the leadership team, how is the report that was issued regarding the budget process and the specific recommendations that were made, because that is definitely needs to be incorporated as part of this process. So to me, that is a key piece that is really critical that we don't lose. That would be my main concern.
Thank you, Juanita. We flagged that.
Thank you. Down my hand.
Fred?
Yeah, thank you, Destiny. The just down, I really very much liked the independent consultants report on the budget. But can we, is it public yet, Julia? We weren't supposed to talk about it publicly at all, but I certainly agree that we should. It's a great, I thought it was a great report, and the implementation timeline was critical, I think, to making it a success. But can we say that publicly at this point, or talk about it even in our listening session coming up?
Yeah, let me jump in. It's no secret that there is a draft report. I think it may be finalized this week. It's
Okay.
kind of right around this time, so soon. And, you know, some of you offered feedback. There were other folks giving feedback because the report wasn't done, right? They wanted some
Right.
folks to reflect on it. So then the consultant went back and is probably making some revisions. But as soon as it is available to be public, I will let you know. And I don't think it will be a very long time from now.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Fred.
Zach. Zach.
Back.
Oh,
Thank you.
hey, sorry. Well, I saw Lori and Jose already commented to the third bullet. I mean, just getting back to reviewing the reactions from the online survey, I think it was pretty like spread out. And I think that's largely because not a lot of people engage in the budget. And I think we need to do a lot more of the kind of one of these one-on-one presentations. I know the city budget office does that at the beginning of every one of their budget listening sessions, but I think that's not really what we're looking to try to expand upon. I think a passive, like having a more passive way of educating on the website, like explaining through a video or something that's interactive, is really meaningful and powerful. And then having other people involved in excuse me, having other like times and locations in which there's budget feedback and education. You know, I work at the county, and we did budget hearings at one on East County, and that's pretty different than having it be all virtual or at the 1900 building. So I strongly encourage this kind of like elements of three. And I think there's also some value of having something that's a living resource that exists on the city budget website.
Thank you, Zach.
Come on, Destiny.
Thank you, Terry. So we've captured the thinking that has been brainstormed right now. Next slide, please. Okay, and then our final area of recommendations is setting up council committees. As someone who did some research into that, very niche topic. But here are some revisions that, or some ideas that came up from the input. I'm going to pause for a second so some people could read it or can gather their thoughts if they had any from their own report reading. Fred? Oh, Freddie, you're muted.
I'm confused about the fourth bullet. Is that apostrophe supposed to be there? Because it's a possessive. Should the committee?
No, it's just grammatical.
Okay, thanks. That helps. Thanks.
Lori?
Two things I was going to say, and one of them is what Juanita commented on. I thought it was interesting to think about the committees being aligned to the strategic planning priorities. I thought that was really a good idea. And I also like to comment about explain the legislative responsibilities for committees versus executive function. I thought that was worth exploring or making clearer, which got me to, I really think the committees should be aligned to the strategic plan and legislative priorities.
Thank you, Lori, for your comments and suggestions. We've captured that. Zach?
I guess Lori, could you restate that? Because I missed where that's coming from with the executive piece.
Lori?
I think it was just a comment in the report.
Oh, am I missing it? Okay, I didn't read it then. I didn't see that piece then.
It just resonated with me because I got to think, because I was involved in the committee, looking at committees too, and it really resonated. Oh yeah.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
What is it? It really is about legislative, not administrative function, I think, but we should clarify that.
So I was just gonna speak a little bit to that fifth bullet point. I think there's going to be, we might want to or not want to wrestle with the challenge that there are likely to be some kind of committee or advisory bodies that exist that play into some of our subcommittee suggestions. There was the well, actually, I don't know if that fits to the fifth one, but there was a conversation at ERCO about having advisory bodies be matched to every subcommittee that we would recommend. And that would be potentially a way where we would have external voices in those subcommittees, which we discussed at some length, I think, in our full committee. And so I think that's an interesting idea, but one that maybe we need to discuss a little bit further because it might be a lot of duplication. And so this gets back to this whole realignment of advisory bodies and committees, which we talk also about in our budget advisory committees. So anyway, sorry for the ramble.
Thank you for capturing all of that and sharing that, Zach, because you did do the whole loop. We did capture it. And I do think that will be something we'll have to raise for the next meeting and see from the survey that ongoing conversation and thoughts. Juliet?
Thanks, Destiny. I just don't exactly understand that fifth bullet. What does it mean to identify their area of responsibility? I mean, to whom or how? And wouldn't that be clarified before the subcommittee was formed? I don't quite follow that.
That was actually a me part, and that was a response to the whether or not committee should fall and be exactly named as service. It's that whole conversation of service alignment or just general legislative, which is what Lori's kind of indicating on, which might have, again, that's a deeper conversation that we've had. And I phrased it like that because I think I looked online that the Detroit City Council subcommittee, they list what subcommittees they have, and then they put their responsibility areas based on that. And so if there is, in my mind, if there is a sustainability subcommittee, I could see Parks and Rec being a part of that, or so again, this is one train of thinking. So that was a recommendation that I had, and I can put it on the chat, the Detroit example that I was looking at.
I follow that better now. Thanks.
Thank you, Julia.
Destiny, that's our 5 minutes.
Thank you, Terry. You're the best. Okay. Next slide, please. outside of what we provided for recommendations, we did get obviously community input. We got some city input of some ideas that were proposed, or, you know, feedback and input from our proposed revisions. So this is that area if you want to highlight some things that piqued your interest that you didn't think about, or we didn't think about as a GTAC committee with our recommendations. Zach?
Filling a lot of space today. Sorry, y'all. The second bullet, is that kind of like, I'm just thinking about how we have onboarding recommendations, and obviously this is going to lead into like I really think that we have an opportunity to try to help in that respect, whether they're written out recommendations or they're kind of embedded within the our onboarding, if we get involved in onboarding in some ways as a committee. I would love for us to be able to, I guess, enshrine that on all the work that Juanita, Joe, and others, I apologize, I'm forgetting, have done. And we'll obviously talk about that next. So
Thank you, Zach, for flagging. Juanita?
Yes, I really like the bullet number 1. I think that that is a great idea. I think that we need to revisit that, especially because when we were looking into the budget, there's a comments about recommending a budget engagement group, develop an engagement plan for the budget development process, which I think is critical. So that is actually an issue that it applies to the full city. So I think that it will be important that we look into that, and how do we think in terms of is there one group for engagement? How does that fit? Is one for fiscal, finance, and budget development, and there's other for the districts. So those are questions that we really need to think hard about and come out with some specific recommendations. The second one, I think that we must also focus on the strategic planning process. And I agree with the recommendation that budget shouldn't be developed without the strategic planning. So the budget should be developed based on the priorities that the strategic planning identified, the goals and objectives that are identified through that process. So those are very good. So I just wanna I wanna comment on those because I think those are very critical.
Thank you, Juanita. Terry, and also apologize if you can hear my pets. They are playing right now.
Yeah, I think this is sort of a catch-all section here of stuff that we might be somewhat rearranging, but also just stuff that we missed. And I think just to talk about what Juanita just said, the budget report talks about goal setting and strategic planning. Onboarding talks about goal setting and strategic planning. Everybody is talking about goal setting and strategic planning for the council. Not only how they do it, just the mechanics, but the scope of it. And I don't know whether we'll have the wherewithal to think about what the scope of these planning processes are, but I hope we can get somewhat into. But anyway, I do think that's a big section that might actually be a bunch of work. But it is what it is. And with that, time's up.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you for that experiment of trying to facilitate an interim feedback report and like reflecting on our recommendations. It's not easy. There's a lot of conversations to be had. I do thank you for your patience. And I even more thank you for like working through the confusion because it was not an easy task to do. And we will have much more conversation to be had. And again, like if you get some ideas, feel free to email them. Like we are going to do like the survey, but it's hard. Like these are really big conversations we're meant to be having. And we're very limited on time. And so again, I thank you for your flexibility and even a little bit of discomfort in trying to get through this. And then I see Lori did have one more comment on the last slide. I think it's important to be this prescriptive and can instead align to strategic priorities. So it's a comment on that last slide when we were thinking about it.
It was supposed to say less prescriptive.
Oh, less prescriptive. Thank you. To be less prescriptive. Thank you. Okay, this is a to be continued conversation as we're waiting for more feedback. So thank you. And I will pass it off to Joe, or not Joe, Terry, actually.
Joe, if you have something.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask again, Terry and Destiny as our co-chairs, please consider what we can do in our next meeting to have the full range of discussion that we need to, whatever the format, whatever the timing needs to be, so we can really get through it and end up with recommendations that we feel really good about.
Thank you, Joe. Your feedback is well taken.
Yeah, and just I would just go ahead and add to that between now and then, submit anything that we're forgetting here, and get that to Destiny and I and Julia so that we can anticipate. I mean, what would be kind of a drag is to have this same brainstorming session next time for the second half of our engagement period, if we can avoid it. If new things come up during engagement, send them to us now into these categories. I think that might be really helpful. So that our big next meeting, we can dig in a little further. Other things that I just sort of comment on what we just did. Some of these are just drafting things. Like if we can just describe things better or describe things in a slightly different way to clarify what we meant, to clarify like to staffers where we're headed and what implementation might be helpful, and to clarify what people are thinking about committees but can't articulate during a listening session. I think a lot of that is just drafting and language and better writing and organization. And so we can do some of that in the time being. And I think Julia, Destiny, and I are committed to doing some of that in advance. But some of it is going to just take some grinding through discussion. And if we can narrow those categories and maybe even take some temperature checks between now and then on some of them, we'll try and make it less traumatic. Because I think there's a lot of work to do and one meeting to do it. And so Joe's point is well taken, and I hope we can get our way through that. Okay, so meanwhile, next slide. Onboarding. Go ahead and go to the next slide, I guess. So several of us met to comment on the onboarding plan and came up with some recommendations, and they're represented here. They were slightly edited recently, and that is recommendation number 4, where we added some more words. I guess, Joe, you want to maybe introduce this some, or otherwise I can launch into a tirade.
Well, good. Given a choice between an introduction and a tirade, I think we ought to start with an introduction, and then go into the tirade. Remember that we made recommendations in February. We got a response in May, and then a draft onboarding plan in June, meeting on June 17th, based on the request that we flesh out some of our recommendations, and that a whole lot of new things had come up in the June draft onboarding plan. Julie asked for volunteers. Terry, Juanita, and Amy and I volunteered. We met, I think, once in person, and then exchanged drafts and comments, and came up with what we thought were 4 important, solid recommendations that we'd like GTAC to adopt. Yesterday, we received a response from Tate and Jamie, and we can sort of talk about how that fits into the whole thing. But I think what's on the table now is this subcommittee adopting our recommendation for GTAC consideration on August 7th.
That's my understanding as well. Joe, you want to just move the whole thing as a formal motion, and then we can discuss it as needed?
Yeah, I move that the subcommittee forward to GTAC as a recommendation that GTAC adopt these recommendations, which includes some attachments.
Okay, a second to that. Anybody?
Just for clarification, let me see, I didn't have time to raise my hand. Joe, does that include the other recommendations that were submitted to Julia alongside with this?
I think in our conversation after that, I think all 3 of us sort of agreed that the recommendations that we submitted individually were more like commentary that reinforced the collective recommendations. So as far as mine's concerned, I think of it as further information. But Juanita, if you have a different feeling about yours, you ought to say so.
Yeah, let me think. Since I think that part of the response and that we got there, the leadership team is considering, and is mentioned there that they are going to implement the team building process. I think I think that some of the bullets that are in this one address that also. So okay, thank you. Yeah, so I just want to make sure that it's either the whole thing or none of it. I mean, or not just one piece, but because everybody put a lot of effort in thinking on the other recommendations too. Well, yourself and Terry and Amy. So.
And I see mine as sort of supporting testimony or information for the core recommendations. I don't expect the group to be adopting my own recommendation.
Well,
Okay,
no,
so
it is part of the overall recommendations. It's just more specific in some ways.
Yeah, I think we need to be clear. I don't expect that everybody's adopting all of our individual text as well.
No, I understand that. All I'm saying is that when we make the motion to have the GTAC, to submit this to GTAC, I want to make sure that they receive the full package. That is part of this. Yeah, that is not just this piece.
Yeah.
That is the four. It's your piece, Terry's piece, and my piece, and Amy's piece. I think that she also sent something.
Yeah.
So that's all, that's my clarification, and I want to make sure that that it is a package. That is not just one piece.
And to be crystal clear, to forward those to GTAC, but in support of this recommendation, what we're adopting is the core recommendation that the four of us submitted together. That's what I'm moving.
Right, that's my understanding too. I need a second. I'll second it if I'm allowed to. I'm not sure whether I want. Okay. Further discussion on this.
Do we
I
need?
want to flag Lori's comment to better understand what we're doing with Kate and Jamie's feedback before we move forward with these recommendations as written.
Yeah.
I'm happy to speak to that if no one else is interested. I was really frustrated by their response, to be frank. And for a couple reasons. One, we just got it so late that we can't do much with it. But anyway, and then a couple things on the substance. I was a little irritated. But the nature of this is we are trying to be helpful here. We have expertise, we have got talent, we've got experience, and we've got, we can do as GTAC things that the staff can't do. And so the nature of our onboarding recommendations was, let us help you. We can help you. Help us help you. And we aren't getting that in response. So we added that this work should be more collaborative and more transparent, because it isn't collaborative right now, and it's not transparent right now. And I don't feel like we are being respected in the sense that we're trying to be helpful. And we're spending a lot of time trying to be helpful. So very specifically to our recommendations, their response said, one of the responses was elected officials have the authority to do their jobs as they see fit, including how they engage with the community. And that's an excuse for not having GTAC give guidance as to what the community expects of them in their jobs. It's our role to advise. It's our perspective from the community to advise from that perspective. And I think to dismiss our advice because politicians will do what politicians will do is missing the whole point of the onboarding, at least our role in it. And again, I just think there are things that we can do as representatives of the community to give the expectations of what community wants that staff can't. And they should call us. We can do that for them. So I think our recommendations as is are sound, solid, and worth submitting to the full GTAC for approval, even with Jamie's and Tate's response. So anyway, that was the tirade. I'm done now. Amy.
Well, I just want to say I agree and want to reiterate that I don't think that their response substantively changes the recommendations that we made. And something I just want to call out about it is that throughout this process, we've been asking for a level of specificity. And in that response, it says, we're hoping to work with consultants that we already have on contract. We are hoping to do these things. And at this point, we've asked a number of times for names and dates and specific information about who these partners are. And that response was even less informative about those things. So at this point, that doesn't change our recommendations. And in order to consider them at the October 7th or the August 7th meeting, we need to have something sent from the subcommittee. And also, we as a subcommittee, I would say, or I would just like add that one thing we're asking staff for is specificity and the name of the consultants, the timelines, the drafts of the books, and none of that stuff has changed and none of that stuff has been addressed in these responses, in my opinion.
Joe.
Joe, you're on
Joe,
mute.
you're muted.
Got it. Two totally different things. The first is that I really appreciate that Tate and Jamie responded so quickly. And I hope that that's a model for our communication in the future, rather than the past when it took months to get responses to things. I would hope that we're able to see one another as partners and communicate fully and in a timely way. I wish we had time to really consider everything that was in this memo and incorporate it, but we don't. And I think for me, the memo underscores the recommendations that we made and the importance of them. The last time that we got any substantive information was June 10th, which was 7 weeks ago. And 7 weeks later, we're told that things have changed considerably, that there's a December 18th session that is going to include a lot of the material that we've talked about, but we never heard of a December 18th session. In the original draft onboarding plan, December 18th is just the day before December 19th, which is when the swearing in happens. And there's nothing special about December 18th, except that people are going to be preparing for the next day. So it might not be the best day for a large session, but I'm really glad that there will be one and that the material that we've recommended will be incorporated. There's also an implication that the very detailed agenda that we got for the December 7th session has been changed dramatically, because we're told a couple of times that things are going to happen on December 7th that aren't in the draft onboarding plan for December 7th. So I think all of that illustrates the need for, again, a partnership and timely information in both directions. And then the other thing is that the memo really helps understand, on the one hand, how challenging this is going to be and what the constraints are. And on the other hand, how much needs to be conveyed during this very limited time, all of which to me underscores the need for having a seasoned professional who understands how to put together complex processes like this. And we're told, once again, that leadership, I should put that in air quotes, leadership has said clearly that you don't want to do that. Well, if leadership means Mike Jordan, we're going to have a chance to ask him about that on August 7th. I think that the recommendations stand as they are. And again, I wish we had time to massage all of this a little bit more, but we don't.
Okay, so we're running out of time, and we need to vote on this, I think. Lori, one last thing.
Yeah, one last thing is I don't disagree with a lot of the recommendations. And yes, I wish that we had more time to perhaps massage them based on the feedback, because I think that they're listening to several of the recommendations and maybe some not so much. But I caution us against thinking that we are collaborators or partners in this process. I don't think we've been invited to do that. Our role is advisors. And we can provide this input, but us getting very frustrated about them not taking the input or not being transparent enough with us or not collaborating with us, I just think that we have heard many times that is not our role. And to continue to frustrate ourselves over that, I think is useless. So I don't agree, and I won't vote for. I don't agree with the additions of the words at the bottom of GTAC's role.
Okay, more discussion. Okay, well, it's, I think we go to a roll call.
Terry, I'm happy to help with that if folks are ready.
I'm ready.
Well, let me ask
I'm
one
seeing some
question.
questions though from Fred and Destiny.
I didn't realize it was already in motion. I'm sorry.
No, that's right. Could we divide the motion into each of the three elements? The bold-faced elements, so that GTAC's role is separate? That's up to the chairs, sorry.
Yeah, that would be a motion to divide, a motion. You have a second, you can get a second.
So moved.
So instead of adding to the motion, what if we simply withdrew the original second, withdrew the original motion, and remake a motion that, moving recommendation 1, recommendation 2, recommendation 3, and recommendation 4 as 4 separate motions?
And that would work as well.
I'll withdraw my motion.
Okay. So we've withdrawn everything now, is what I understand. So let's start with the first motion. And I guess that's recommendation 1 and recommendation 2 combined, Joe?
If no one objects, yeah, sure.
Okay, that's moved. Is there a second? And
Second.
okay. And just let's do the roll call on that.
Okay, and so just to clarify, this is just recommendation 1 and recommendation 2 combined.
Correct.
Okay. Jose,
Yes.
Terry,
Yes.
Lori, Lori, is that a yes?
Yes.
Joe,
Oops. Yes.
Juliet,
Yes.
Zach,
Yes.
Destiny,
Yes.
Fred,
Yes.
Amy,
Yes.
Juanita.
Yes.
So yeah, that passes.
Okay, so then the second part of the 3-part or 4-part motion. Joe, you want to make that one again?
Yeah, I move recommendation 3, which is recommending adding the 6 elements that are described in some detail in the document.
Fred seconds.
Great, move second. Any narrow discussion on that? Seeing none, let's call the roll on that one.
Okay, I'm gonna go in the same order. Jose,
Yes.
Terry,
Yes.
Lori,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Juliet,
Yes.
Zach,
Yes.
Destiny,
Yes.
Fred,
Yes.
Amy,
Yes.
Juanita.
Yes.
That is unanimous and passes.
Okay, Joe, next one.
Yeah, so recommendation 4 was actually slightly different in the original document that you got, which was recommending that the role and working relationship with the transition team be more clearly defined, with some bullets under that. In subsequent discussions, the four of us agreed that we wanted to say something a bit more specific, and that role not only be more clearly defined, but that the approach to the work be more collaborative and transparent. So I'd like to move the version that you see on the screen, but I do want to point out that that's slightly different from what's in the document.
Okay, is there a second? And if there isn't, I don't know whether I can second it or not.
I'll second it for purposes of discussion.
Okay, then discussion. Juliet.
Yes, thank you, Terry. I guess this one I can take or leave because it's so subjective. But more clearly defined. Well, I don't think that really could hurt anybody. And more collaborative and transparent, which is a word I never really understand because it's so much in the eye of the beholder. So sure, we could do that stuff. I understand that Joe is looking at a different version of this bullet, but I think if we're actually going to look for results, it needs to be have more teeth to it. So I don't think it would do any harm to approve it, but I'm not sure how we would gauge whether it's actually happening or not.
Oh,
So the bullets and I've got the original version on that do provide some specificity to that are seek GTAC's input early enough to influence transition team decisions, provide timely updates to GTAC when transition team decisions are made, especially in response to our recommendations, and clarify GTAC's role in developing and reviewing onboarding deliverables, which are in the draft onboarding plan, but not addressed in the memorandum at all. Now, to assume we're
discussion.
adopting the bullets along with the overall recommendation.
Okay, we're running up against our time limit, but can we get a roll call on that?
Yep. Okay, so I'm gonna do the same order. Jose,
No.
Terry,
Yes.
Lori,
No.
Joe,
Yes.
Juliet, Juliet. Can you hear me? I can come back to you. Oh,
No, that I was unmuted.
I'm sorry, did you say no?
I voted no.
Okay, thanks, Juliet, sorry. Zach,
I abstain. I honestly think that this can be something we can talk as a full group, and I'd love to see the full text that we recommend.
Destiny,
I'm also abstaining.
Fred, Fred,
No.
Amy,
Yes.
Juanita.
Yes.
So that is 1, 2, sorry. That is 4 yeses, 4 noes, and 2 abstain, so that one does not pass.
Okay, so that means the first one's due, and they will be referred to the full GTAC meeting coming up August 7th. And so with that, we go to the next
Terry-
slide.
Terry, I'm sorry. Do you see Zach's question in the chat?
Yeah, it's a
I'm
really
okay.
good question, Zach. That we were asked to do those things, and that's a really good question. Are we adopting that text or simply a recommendation that those topics be addressed in the onboarding? And I don't have a good answer to that. I wouldn't expect that we all have read it carefully enough to endorse every word of it. So I don't know what to say.
I think at this point, perhaps we have voted on the slide version of the text, and that can go to GTAC, and our supporting document can go in support of that recommendation to GTAC, and GTAC can decide what to do with it at that full meeting. Does that sound okay?
At the time, I thought of it as an attachment, essentially, and not part of the recommendation, other than these topics are important. We've been asked to sort of explain what we think about these topics, and here it is.
Lori.
Will we be providing Tate and Jamie's response to GTAC along with the recommendations?
Sure.
Okay, thanks.
Juanita.
Yes, I will. I feel strongly that the attachment should be submitted to GTAC also. I think that they provide a better explanation, and like Terry said, is the support the recommendations, and so therefore that's my position.
Yeah, I think that's not unlike what we've been doing with all of our recommendations, basically. We have a top level recommendation that we vote on, and then there's some narrative that goes with it and attachments that go with it. So I think it's similar to what we've been doing. And so GTAC will get the whole package for the full meeting to discuss and around these preliminary subcommittee recommendations. Okay. All right. I think that gets us to the next slide. Destiny, you're up again.
Let me bust these out really quick. So the recording of this meeting will be posted on the committee's website and is available after the meeting ends on the Office of Management and Finance YouTube channel. The Voter and Candidate Education and Outreach Subcommittee meets tomorrow, July 31st. Our final community listening session is Thursday, August 1st. The next full GTAC meeting is August 7th. This group reconvenes on August 27th to finalize our recommendations. This is a crucial meeting and it is scheduled for 2 hours. Please make every effort to attend and also email us in between. And I want to thank everyone for your participation today and trying as best as we can to get through it all. And